Hello, welcome to the International House of Japan. I'm Fiona Wilson here in Tokyo. I'm Asia Bureau Chief for Monocle magazine, which is based in London. This is the 7th session of the webinar series, Leaders Shaping the Future of the Indo-Pacific. Today our focus is smart cities in Asia and how they can impact the well-being of their citizens. Rapid urbanization has led to the rise of the huge cities we see in Asia today, and the scale of these cities raises a number of issues about quality of life for those living in them. Some of these issues have become more prominent in the current pandemic, potential risks of dense populations, the changes in the working environment caused by decentralization, which is a result of digitalization, and of course over the last year, COVID-19, and more generally, the well-being of people in urban societies where efficiency and economic growth have been prioritized over livability. We have two experts from Korea and Singapore, both places which have made pioneering efforts in terms of anti-COVID measures and digitalization. They're going to tell us what they think the future of cities and smart cities in Asia could look like. JEONG is professor in the Department of Bio and Brain Engineering and the head of the Graduate School of Transdisciplinary Studies at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, better known as KAIST. After receiving his PhD in physics from KAIST, Professor JEONG worked in the departments of psychiatry at both Yale University, then Columbia University. His research topics include the brain dynamics of decision-making, brain-robot interface, and brain-inspired artificial intelligence. He was selected as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum in 2009 and has also received several awards from the scientific community, publishing more than 90 research articles for such journals as Nature, Nature Medicine, and Nature Communications. And crucially for today, he's been working as a master planner of the Sejong Smart City National Pilot Project since 2018. Welcome to Professor JEONG. Erwin VIRAY is professor and head of Pillar for Architecture and Sustainable Design at Singapore University of Technology and Design. Before taking up his post in Singapore, Professor VIRAY was the Global Excellence Professor at the Kyoto Institute of Technology. Outside of teaching, he's held several leadership roles, including serving on the Advisory Council for the Barcelona Institute of Architecture and the Singapore President's Design Awards jury, for which he has been chair since 2013. He has authored and co-authored several books and written numerous articles for specialized journals and magazines on architecture. And he says he's inspired by Singapore's Smart Nation initiative, which seeks to understand how architecture and design can work with innovative technologies to create new experiences and spaces. Wow, very impressive CVs from both of them. I think, first of all, we're going to hear from each speaker. They're going to talk about their work, and we'll start with Professor JEONG.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to give a presentation and introduction about how the South Korea developed the smart city. Actually, as you introduced, I'm the master planner of the National Pilot Project of Smart City in Sejong. There are several approaches to smart city. One is a city regeneration. So we use the smart technology to recover or regenerate the old traditional cities. And there are several master planners. And National Pilot Project is very special. We'd like to experiment how smart technology can be applied to the urban services to improve the quality of life and the sustainability. So it's a kind of a big test bed. So I'd like to introduce what is smart city and what's the importance of the National Pilot Project as a test bed or a platform. Okay. Why don't you show me the slide? Okay, yeah. Next slide, please. There are several versions of the definitions in smart city, but I'd like to give you my own definition as a smart city is the smart city is a kind of platform to provide a predictive, customized services to the residents and citizens. So we monitored all the phenomena all the movements, all the behavior is within the city and make them into data and analyze them using the AI to provide a excellent quality to improve the happiness. You might be familiar with the concept, the U-city, ubiquitous city, but in that case, we want to use the smart technology to reduce the expenses or increase the efficiency of the energy. So it's quite manager-oriented for the city. But in that case, we'd like to put the cities, citizens, and residents in the center for the smart technology. Next slide. There are so many factors make the big cities unsustainable. As I mentioned on the slide, excessive energy or pollutions. And the next slide. And we also have many factors make the big cities unhappy. Too crowded and too competitive, and a lot of crimes. So big city definitely have advantages, a lot of creative opportunity for occupations, and we can learn a lot from smart people in the big cities. But there are also many problems. So the idea of the smart city is to reduce the problems in the big cities and increase the creative opportunities. Even small cities can have the creative opportunities, and they'd like to have their own advantages over the big cities. That's the idea. The next slide, please. So the significant philosophy of the Sejong as a smart city is that post-materialism. So many people think the smart city is a technopia, so technology-oriented city, but definitely no. We'd like to recover the human life, the lifestyle, and eco-friendly environment, and human-centered urban services. So the environment, the space, buildings look quite eco-friendly, but the technology is hidden, and they just support the disabled people, and even the individuals, healthy individuals have a better urban services. And we only use the smart technologies to increase the happiness and the quality of life. Next slide. So the fourth industrial revolution technology is the main idea, main technologies to convey these services. So big data technology, AI, and the blockchain, and the cloud systems. Next. We decide 7 areas: mobility, energy, shopping and culture, and healthcare, education, and the job and creative occupations. These areas are major areas to increase the, to determine the happiness and quality of life in the citizens within the city. So we suggest 25 urban services within these 6 and 7 areas, and they are all based on the smart technologies. Next slide. So AI and blockchains are major technologies. The big data should be analyzed using the artificial intelligence, and the data security and privacy issue is a critical in smart cities. So we use the blockchain to overcome these problems. Next slide. There are many smart cities in European countries, in the United States, and other areas, but our approach is a little bit different. usually the major driving force of the smart city in European countries and the United States are municipalities. So the financial support is quite limited. So they only assign the one specific area, for example, the energy or healthcare or mobility as for one city. So the one city is selective for specific areas as a smart city. But as you know, the city is a complex system. A lot of areas are combined and converged to provide urban services. So this project, Sejong Smart City, is a government-driven. So 7 areas, we collected the data, big data from the 7 areas about the individuals, but we'd like to combine them in a one big platform to have a synergetic services and synergetic outcomes. That's the idea, and that's the difference from other smart cities in Europe or other countries. Next slide. Sejong is the center of the Han Peninsula in South Korea. So, which means that it's easy to expand our services to other areas in Korea, and it's a major center for the transportation. Next slide. And the environment, natural environment is almost perfect. We have a big forest, the mountain, hills, and swamp. So we use the smart technology to make them more friendly with humans without any perturbations and damages in nature. So how to use the technology to conserve the nature and have better interactions with humans and increase the biodiversity is a major issue in smart city, I believe. So again, smart city is not a technopia. Smart city is to use the smart technology to make humans coexist with nature. Next slide. So we reduced the number of automobiles by designating major areas with no cars. So their traffic systems are totally different, and personal mobilities are major vehicles in these areas. Next slide. So the road systems are totally different, and the cars are one of them, just one of them. Next slide. I'd like to put an emphasis on the regulatory sandbox strategy. In Korea, there are a lot of regulations, and these are important for the current services. But the smart city is a future city, so we don't have a good regulations for the new services and new technologies. So we need to experiment what level or what kind of technologies and what extent we should use the smart technology for the urban services. So within these areas, there are a lot of experimentations and the attempt will happen. Next slide. Finally, I'd like to stress the importance of the cross-validation strategy with other smart cities in Europe and United States and the East Asian countries. We believe that we need to share our smart technology for urban services with other smart cities because our experience is quite limited, so we need to share them. So we invite startup and private companies from other smart cities, and we also export the startups and companies having the good smart technologies for the urban services to other smart cities in other areas. So cross-validation, whether this smart technology is validated in other countries or not, is important issues, and we'd like to validate them together. So international global cooperation to overcome the climate change or the inequality or better services to increase the quality of life and happiness is important, and the cooperation among the countries and among the cities are critical. So I'd like to hope the Sejong Smart City experience will increase and share with other smart city in other countries to enhance their services as well. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I don't have to give a presentation.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great to hear you talking about happiness and putting residents at the centre of the smart city.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel that they're slightly forgotten. Professor VIRAY, can we hear from you about your work?
Yeah, thank you very much, Fiona, for the very kind introduction. Thank you also to Professor JEONG for the enlightening sharing about Sejong Smart City. Thank you to the International House of Japan for giving this opportunity to be sharing with you the experience we have in Singapore. Professor JEONG actually shared with you what it is to be involved in the smart city like Sejong. I would be sharing with you what we do in the School of Architecture, what we call the Architecture and Sustainable Design pillar of the Singapore University of Technology and Design, and then how it would relate to the national agenda in Singapore and then the university agenda. May I ask if the slides could be shown and shared? Thank you. So we pride ourselves as a multidisciplinary university offering a curriculum to explore smart homes and green cities. So today we would like to show you some of the things that we do. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we see different levels of agenda. So the question is, what is the plan for a smart and sustainable city? And then how are we contributing to the plan? So in the national strategies, there are two agencies that actually work on this. One is the Urban Redevelopment Authority, URA, Master Plan 2019. And the other one in the Prime Minister's office is the Smart Nation Singapore by Smart Nation and Digital Government Office. The next one would be, next slide, please. So the Urban Redevelopment Authority is a statutory land use plan that guides Singapore physical development over the next 10 to 15 years. The draft master plan of 2019, it focuses on planning for inclusive, sustainable, and green neighborhoods with community spaces and amenities for all to enjoy. It also includes strategies that plan for the rejuvenation of our familiar places and to create capacity to meet our future needs. So 1, providing more housing options to choose from. 2, living in a smart and sustainable town. And 3, creating community-centric and connected neighborhoods. And 4, HDB biophilic town. Hopefully, people will be happy if they would have this. Thank you. Next slide, please. And then the other part would be from the Prime Minister's office, is the national strategy led by Smart Nation and Digital Government Office. It is tasked with transforming Singapore through technology, and there are 6 key initiatives in them. One would be strategic national projects. One is health. Another is transport. Another is urban living. Another would be digital government services. And then the 6th one would be startups and businesses. Next slide, please. And so the initiatives of high relevance to architecture I will share with you would be 1, urban living. With the limited land, Singapore needs to continuously find innovative solutions to improve the urban environment, estates and homes for residents, to make them safer, more sustainable and livable. So in order to do that, there is a drive, like for example, in the Housing Development Board for automated meter reading. It is on trial. Drones to survey dengue hotspots. It's one of the menaces of Singapore. You have these dengue mosquitoes bringing illnesses to people. And then, of course, my environment app to actually make you more familiar with your environment. And Virtual Singapore platform to imagine the whole island, city-state. One service app actually connects you to all the government services available. And then the planning for people and businesses, this is also done to encourage not only providing the environment, but also businesses to actually make money in order to support all this. And then very important consideration and emphasis is also given to smart elderly people. And so there is the smart elderly alert system for people who usually the elderly who live by themselves. And of course, creating the smart towns that would have all these digital possibilities and programs to create a livable and sustainable environment to make everyone happy. Next slide, please. And so in the strategic national projects to drive the pervasive adoption of digital and smart technologies throughout Singapore, key national projects have been identified, which are key enablers in the Smart Nation drive. One of them would be the Smart Nation sensor platform, introducing sensors in the city to actually be responsive and interactive so that many things can be done with immediacy. And then, of course, another would be smart urban mobility, how people move in the city, and not only in the city, but not only people, but also goods, especially now in the COVID situation. I think the transportation of goods is something that has to be given emphasis. So that is also given a lot of attention. And so transport comes into attention. In the land scarce Singapore, 20% of the land is set aside for roads and transport infrastructure. With a growing population and more than 1 million vehicles on the road, it is a challenge in optimizing the use of the limited space for more efficient, safe, reliable, and enhanced transportation. So there is also the experiment and test to use autonomous vehicles. And then having open data analytics for urban transportation. As Professor JEONG has shared, it's using data to actually determine the condition and then offering the possibilities to maybe create solutions for problems or maybe other possibilities to make that a better environment. Next slide, please. And so how are we contributing as a university to the plan? One would be through the Cities of Tomorrow, we call COT, Research and Development Program. And then another would be the SUTD Research Project on Smart Cities. Next slide, please. So the Cities of Tomorrow COT R&D program is a multi-agency effort led by the Ministry of National Development to identify challenges that cities face and develop R&D solutions to address these challenges. A total of 150 million has been set aside for COT, which is part of the 900 million allocated to the Urban Solutions and Sustainability domain under the Research, Innovation, and Enterprise 2020. We call it the RIE 2020. Most academics actually would be applying for this. So for you, if you want to do things, you would have to apply for the RIE 2020. And so the key research verticals for RIE 2020 would be in advanced construction, is productive construction, making construction digital, resource and land optimization. So again, imagining how we can optimize the limited resource we have and use them. And then nuisance mitigation. Singapore is a very small place, so I think that it is good to make everyone happy. How do you keep everyone from being disturbed? So that is one important consideration. The other one would be on resilient infrastructure, on building structure and facade fixtures, how you can make more sustainable and green structures. And the building systems, I guess, is how you control and then maybe manage these building systems that would make a sustainable and a green and smart city. And because of the lack of spaces, the creation of new spaces also, one is through underground space, and then the other would be through land reclamation. And then, of course, the fourth one would be the greater sustainability, which is done through attention on urban ecosystems, Another one would be on the quality of living. So again, the quality of life that people can have so that they'll be happier. And then energy and resource efficiency, how we can manage and use our energy and resource optimally. And then, of course, because of the sea water level rise due to the climate change, the coastal protection. So there is also a plan to actually create a polder city to protect the island from the sea water level rise. To enable all these vertical horizontals would be the horizontal enablers. One would be the urban environment analytics and the complex science for urban solutions. Again, as Professor JEONG has said, it is the data and then how you actually analyze and interpret the data that would make possible the solutions to these key issues. Next slide, please. And so for the SUTD research project, Smart Cities, we have innovative planning and design of age-friendly neighborhoods in Singapore. This is to inform and aid planners and designers to create age-friendly neighborhoods in Singapore. Aging is a very important problem, not only in Singapore, but I guess all over the world, and especially in Asia. And then, of course, the second one would be future of Asian cities, citizen urban science, practice, and policy. So practice, policy are very important because policy drives many things and then can lead you to better results. And so this area maps the urban challenges in Southeast Asian cities and investigates the impacts of urban science and technologies on city development, urban governance, as well as the lives of citizens. Again, it means that the study is not just in Singapore, but actually in the Southeast Asian cities, our neighbors, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, Laos, and all the ASEAN members. We study how we can actually understand the cities better and then offer solutions to these cities. I think that, as Professor JEONG said, it is actually by comparing and looking at these different places that we can understand much better what is for us and then for them too. So, and then the third area will be urban science and design for density. So developing innovative design solutions for future sustainable high density, high livability cities. Because of the small land capacity, that means that we have no choice but actually to live in denser quantities. So we have to somehow imagine how that would be possible. Next slide, please. And so as a school of architecture, as a pillar, as we call it, how are we contributing to the plan? And so with the architecture and sustainable contributions are through the Sustainable Design Options Studio, the investigations we make, and then, of course, the thesis investigations by our students. Next slide, please. So in the Sustainable Design Options Studio, I am sharing with you two examples that actually deal with smart urban mobility and autonomous vehicles. There is one Sustainable Options Studio that was titled Drones on the Beach, a coastal drone port for Singapore, that explored novel architectural experiences and forms through defining what a drone port might be, how it will function for humans and for robots. Another will be Autopia, that investigates constraints of design for automated vehicles and how these fleets of vehicles might behave within the urban district. So how they would interact with humans with the existing infrastructure of the city. Next slide, please. And of course, we also look into resilient and smart architecture in the post-pandemic world. So architecture and resilience is one important consideration and explores ways to design resilient architecture that is spatially and temporally reconfigurable as it adapts to uncertain future scenarios in the new normal of post-COVID-19 through the use of design modeling and game-based simulation of multi-agent systems by the deep reinforcement learning algorithms of AI. So I will be sharing with you a video in the next slide that shows the work of our freshman students, as we call them, the first-year students, to study how we can actually deal with the space in the post-COVID-19 world. So in this video, we share with you what the students have done to actually imagine what are the different components that would be involved in imagining a healthier space for everyone. One is the movement of people in the space itself. Another would be the sound in the space, how maybe wearing a mask is affected, how the sound is actually muffled. This investigation was actually advised by one colleague who is from Korea, so who's an expert in acoustics. So we're very happy that he could actually lead the students through that exercise. Another would be through the quality of air in the space itself and how it moves. So they were trying to imagine how the air conditioner would actually be driving driving air in the space, the ventilation, and also like if you sneeze, how it would actually be infecting everyone. And then of course, the last part would be the AI and then the machine learning simulation, agent-based and game-based learning to imagine like possibilities like if you put something here, how the others could react to it, or how the furnitures, maybe the automated furnitures could actually react to the presence of people. So these are the works of the Freshmore students. And in this slide, we actually share with you also that what we do is not just within Singapore and then in the university, but we are very active in pursuing collaboration with people from different parts of the world. And one of them is the Hyper Village. It's a project. It's a collaboration between Sam Joyce from SUTD ASD and then Ryuji Fujimura from Tokyo University of the Arts, which asks the question of what will drive habitation post-metropolis. So in the diagram below, you see that scale from the city, metropolis to hypervillage. As centralized living and work make way for more digital ephemeral alternative, like how we live now and how we have been living our lives affected by the pandemic, the idea of the hypervillage as a speculative projection of what this future might be is explored. The hypervillage is hypothesized as a new post-urban condition which replaces traditional reasons for the city with digital technology that frees people to modulate their locations, be it urban or rural, to best suit the needs and allow for better social flexibility. So I think that like now we carry our phone, we can use our phone to actually maybe connect with others and then maybe select the location where we can be so that we can live healthier and happier lives. So these are the slides that I have, and thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor VIRAY. Fascinating to see what students think the post-COVID university world will look like. I was just wondering, I mean, in the current COVID world, I'm just wondering, how have smart cities responded? Have the initiatives in smart cities, have they made it easier to combat COVID-19? Perhaps Professor JEONG, I can ask you that one first.
Yeah. Sadly speaking, the COVID-19 situation has made a prominent contribution to recognizing the importance of the smart city in governments and the citizens. So joining the city areas and using the public transport in a large scale during rush hours in the current cities, even small cities, is very dangerous. And let us recognize how vulnerable it can be to this COVID-19 epidemic. So in Sejong Smart City, this is a very small city that I master planned, but I emphasize the concept of mixed zone in the city areas and personal mobility driven road systems that make it easy to use electric surfboards and other personal mobility devices. And there has been a lot of oppositions from doctors about telemedicine. But if there was a system where all the patients with a suspected COVID-19 infections were screened through telemedicine care without coming to the hospitals, then where there would not have been a large-scale medical attack in the hospitals it is now. So I suggest the city is a big school in the master plan, and I believe we can learn anywhere in the city. So I include the remote class system in the master plan, which was very unfamiliar at that time, but now Sejong residents believe that they are very fortunate and they are very familiar with the Zoom system like this. So, and I believe that the small city, the big cities, the COVID-19 changed a lot, and we learn a lot how to manage the cities to fight against the epidemics.
Yeah, I think we've all got used to remote learning and living, haven't we, in these times? Professor VIRAY, can I just ask you, in Singapore, you touched on it, digital governance. Has that come into play in combating COVID-19?
Yes, Fiona, it was very useful also. And I think that having the Trace Together application actually helped control and combat the COVID-19 spread. And then also, I think that it's also a testament to the soundness of the master planning and the urban planning of the neighborhoods, because I think that it was possible to actually isolate certain areas when they're affected. And then also, despite the fact that they're in certain areas, you can actually have all the amenities and all the things that you would need in this area. So that means that you can still continue to live a happy life, I guess, because you have all these amenities. The green spaces also are very helpful in this. So the digital governance is actually very helpful in this. Adjustments were made, and I think new lessons were learned because during the SARS outbreak, they had this also, but they also did not somehow anticipate the extent of this and then the lethal quality of COVID-19. So it was an opportunity to recalibrate and then reaffirm a few of the things that were learned in SARS time to the new challenges of COVID-19. One of the things that proved to be very challenging was that the workers' housing, because you have many migrant workers who are working in Singapore. And so that was something that somehow seemed to have escaped the digital control. But once it was identified that that was a problem, they were able to contain it and then offer solutions to the problem.
Yeah, it's very interesting that issue about collecting data. And I think you can see from different parts of the world, people have a different view on that. Professor JEONG, you touched on that, on the issue of privacy. And I wonder, how do you think that's impacting citizens' lives? This, data collection does certainly impact their privacy at the same time.
Yeah, it's in South Korea, the invasion of the data privacy or the personal data protection and the personal data management are very critical issues. To the end, we are designing the data management systems in Sejong Smart City with many data experts. So first of all, we are going to conduct an urban experiment with citizens who accept the use of their own personal data in Sejong National Pilot Project. So we will also test to what extent, what level it is appropriate to use personal data, how to collect, how to store and manage them, and how useful the blockchain or cloud systems are. So after reaching the social consensus through this experimental procedure, we are going to expand it to other cities in Korea. So that is why Sejong Smart City National Pilot Project exists. And I believe that AI analysis using residents' data can well find a way to provide individuals with great satisfaction and the quality of life without compromising personal privacy.
Thanks. Professor VIRAY, is that an issue? Is there a pushback in Singapore? Are citizens saying, we don't want to be watched in this way, we don't want drones, we don't want our movements followed? Is there any talk about that?
There is. And so that was discussed in the parliament. And then so with the Trace Together data being given to the government, and then there was a point that it was mentioned that the police could actually use it to pursue certain things. It became a big discussion in the parliament. So eventually the government acknowledged that it will be used appropriately and will only be used when necessary. And so the issue of ethics and then also the management of these, the proper management of these is being given careful attention.
Can I just ask you both, I mean, you've both mentioned happiness, quality of life. They're such important issues. And, you know, one of the reasons people want to live in a city is the quality of life. And I'm just thinking, how do you actually create that from scratch in a way? Like Sejong, how do you create this sense of this quality of life?
Oh, yeah. I'd like to give some example. At Sejong Smart City, when an emergency vehicle transports an emergency patient, it will notify them of the emergency room situation in nearby hospitals and operating room situations and the situation of doctors who can operate immediately so that the patient can receive the fastest emergency treatment. And it's very important to make a lot of eco-friendly park in the cities, but the municipalities is reluctant to build the parks because they are concerned that it will become a criminal area at night. So we plan to overcome this problem through a smart security system and create many safe parks at night. Small cities are often culturally alienated, so it's hard to see performance concert or the theater plays or musicals. But in Sejong, by using a system that connect the performance team with the potential viewers who want to watch the performance in advance. So we plan to provide a service that guarantees the profits even in a small city. Then you can live in a small city and do cultural activities without feeling culturally alienated. And we also attempt to reduce the commute time by about 1 hour and use that time for exercise, recreation, and other hobbies. Then I think these things will have a huge impact on the individual's quality of life and happiness.
Thank you. Professor VIRAY, I just want to know, you know, in Singapore, you know, how you've got very limited space. Can architecture, do you think it can help create this sense of community? How can it help with that?
Yes, architecture is very useful in creating that sense of community in the neighborhood. So I think that the sense of community is very important because it creates a sense of identity. So I think the Housing Development Board of Singapore actually has been spearheading moves to actually offer amenities, facilities, and spaces that would actually make many people appreciate the sense of community and create identification with the places where they are. And so I think that is very useful. So you would see that people are proud of where they are from because they would have this special dish which can only be found in that place. And then also that the place have certain qualities which may be different from the others. And then, of course, they are also very much involved in maybe building what could be for the future. So like, for example, near the university, there is this place that actually has been spearheading also the production of food also, because despite the limited land, how can you actually produce food to be resilient in 2030, because there is that national agenda. So using methods of 3D printing and architecture, maybe of the high rise, you can actually have a vertical farm to actually produce food also. And then even the recycling of water, as everyone may be aware, Singapore would usually be collaborating with Malaysia to have its water supply, but since a few years back, it has been quite sufficient with water supply because of how it can be purified. And then the whole island is basically a catchment and a reservoir of water. So I think that these are things that are being done, that everyone is able to identify that they are from this neighborhood and that they're Singaporeans. So everyone would be saying that, oh, it's so nice to be in Singapore. It's so safe. We're so lucky to have this. And I think that the government has a big role in this also. And then the grassroots leaders, the community play a very big part in this. So the collaboration is very important.
That's very interesting. Thanks. I know there are lots of people who want to ask questions, and there's a question from Nitobe Leadership Fellow, Motoko Kaneko, and she's got a question regarding smart cities in developing countries. And she says, although many countries say that smart cities are high on their policy agenda, most governments simply nominate candidate cities and then rely on private investment. Does that mean that smart cities in developing countries will be high-end projects? Or can we create more affordable smart cities with less expensive technology? Such a good question, isn't it? Is it only rich countries who can make smart cities?
Right.
Professor Jeong, maybe you can answer.
Definitely. This is a wonderful question. But the very significant philosophy of a smart city is to put on effort to figure out the problems of old and traditional cities or small cities, less developed cities, using IT and other smart technologies without having to do larger scale constructions to fix the city's infrastructure. So I think the smart city is a very useful approach to old and traditional cities in Europe and all the cities in Southeast Asia and South America and Africa. They are less developed. Some of the areas are less developed, but the smart city does not critically require high-end infrastructure at the early and intermediate stages. So while maintaining the old tradition, it can improve the quality of life and sustainability and figure out the inconvenience of citizens without much cost. So in that respect, I'd like to emphasize that smart technology is much cheaper than construction of new urban infrastructure. The bottom line is that even though the application of smart technology to urban services requires financial support from governments and private sectors, but it is less cheaper than previous construction-centered approach in the previous centuries. So in creating a smart city, the private companies' participation is important, and active contributions of residents are very important. So we call it the public-private people partnership. But above all, I think the leadership of the government and municipality is very essential. Even if the government's investment is not huge, but it's also important for them to participate in experimenting new urban technologies all together and help regulation issues and data security issues as well. And the government needs to secure publicity in the participation of the private sectors and monitor their progress so that it can be carried out for the public interest, not just the business feasibility of the companies. So the role of the government is very critical and is much cheaper than the previous approach.
That's very interesting. I mean, I think there's a sort of perception gap, isn't there? People tend to think that smart cities, as you say, this technopia, this very high-tech, very expensive kind of place. And it's interesting, Professor VIRAY, you talked about how your model could be applied to cities in the region. So you're obviously already looking at other countries that are not in the same economic position as Singapore.
Yes. Somehow the pandemic has shown us the possibilities and then the capabilities of those who have and those who have not. Maybe the online access and even the access to the vaccine itself. So I think it's very important to actually consider these situations. It was very interesting that I was having a conversation with an investment banker yesterday, and then we were talking about the importance of policy, government policy, in driving certain directions for the country. And so I think that it's also related maybe to the use of technology, not only the use of technology, but also the possibilities of making money. The investment banker was saying that if the policies actually allow us to make money, then we make money, and then it allows us to have money to actually maybe contribute to society. So he was citing Bill Gates, for example, that he made so much money, and then they created the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then even before the pandemic has started, they were already talking about this possibility and were funding the research on the vaccines for this pandemic. So that's one example that was given. And then, of course, if the policies are sound in the government, and so I think that Professor Jeong was right, that the government is a very good role to play in this, then certain things are possible with the collaboration of the private sector or maybe the non-government agencies to actually be helping each other. So the policies could be helping the non-government agencies actually to implement certain things, because maybe they would understand the ground much better. Because the investment banker also was saying that the technocrats of the government that actually make policy, they should actually know what's happening in the ground. It's very important to know what's happening in the ground so that you can create policies that will be actually helping the ground. And maybe some examples around the region in Southeast Asia. We have a few cities actually that would have architects and planners as mayors and governors. And then maybe because of the training they have as architects and planners, they could imagine, they have imagination to actually look at the resources they have and then make better environment for everyone. So like, for example, the public places in Bandung, the mayor was an architect and then he became governor. So they could create policies that actually help make better environment. So I think that architects and planners can also become mayors and even presidents to actually make things possible by helping policies and then maybe having collaboration with everyone on the ground to actually make this possible. So I think very important components of these would be the policies and the government somehow showing certain ways to do things, and then the people on the ground to actually make this happen. So I think that cost is not an issue. It can come later. So I think it's actually the plans and then the vision, the idea, the imagination that is very important. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks. And you made such a good point about seeing policies in action and seeing things on the ground. You know, so often you hear about plans and strategies, and it's very important, I think, as you say, that technocrats see what happens in the real world. There's another question from the audience here. Quite a specific question. Maybe you don't need to give a precise figure, but the question for both of you is, what percentage of smart cities in Asia should be green spaces, gardens, woods, habitats for biodiversity? So Professor Jeong, perhaps you can take that first.
It depends, I guess, but in South Korea, almost 70% is the green areas, particularly for the small cities. So, which means that there are big potential to change to the urban areas, but there are very strong regulations to develop them in Korea. So the smart technology can be used to provide urban services with very small damage on the green fields.
And Professor VIRAY, I know green is it's very important in Singapore. You have your wonderful botanical gardens and lots of roof gardens, of course.
Singapore, as of course we all know, is a very small island state, and so it's 100%, I should say, because I think that the government actually is aiming into having a garden city, and then or a city in the nature. And I think that even some of the architects are actually creating possibilities by having all the buildings actually green itself. So one of the interesting things is that the Urban Redevelopment Authority has actually created measures to reward people who actually offer back green to the city. So like, for example, Park Royal Hotel, which is one of the examples that's always being cited as a biophilic example of an environment, has actually created a situation whereby the green that was there in the land was actually brought up to all the levels of the structure itself. So the green has been brought back by about 1,000 or 100%. So I think that it's one maybe of the aims, the ideal aims of the city. Thank you.
Good to have ideals, I think. That's good to hear. Now, this is a question for Professor Jeong, and I'm sure many people will want to know this. We're all very impressed that someone with your expertise has been appointed Master Planner of Sejong, Professor Jeong. And, how does your academic expertise impact the future of city development?
Good question. Actually, I'm working on the application of AI to the big data obtained from the hospitals. So more than 100,000 patients. So I think the current approach can be extended to the city level. That's the master planning of the city, and a lot of things to do using the brain engineering for the cities, particularly in this COVID-19 situations. So as you know, there have been fewer social encounters since the COVID-19 situation for more than 1 year. So longer time alone at home, and people with deep depression are increasing, and the stress caused the home violence and drug addictions are also very severe. So I think it's a great help later that the home monitoring system for them using the brain engineering will let your doctor know. And we also create more space for a walk in the eco-friendly parks in the smart city. So I think the brain engineering and neural architecture that I'm working on has been great help for my master plan.
Yeah, it's great to hear about a more holistic approach to city building. That's very good to hear. Now, Professor VIRAY, this is a question for you with your Japan experience. A member of our audience wants to know, what are some of the hurdles that Japan must overcome to be able to fully leverage the power of technology? Big question.
Japan is a big country with many opinions. So I think that that would be something of a high hurdle. But I think that the Japanese also have a certain quality in them to actually come together. So I think that would be a very, very a good quality they would have, character that they have in order to push these things. And so I think that, again, there should be a strong will from the government, I think, in terms of the policies that they would have to do. And then I think that if they can convince everyone, the people of Japan, to actually go into this, then I think that it will be a very powerful endeavor, I think. If we look at the history of Japan, the industries and certain sectors of Japan have actually driven Japan to become a world power economically and then industrially. And I think that given the same pattern, I think Japan would be able to go through this and become a digital powerhouse.
Thank you very much. This could be a good moment to bring in Takahiko Nagumo, who's Senior Managing Executive Officer for Mitsubishi UFJ Research and Consulting, and they're co-organizers of this session.
Thank you very much for the introduction. First of all, thank you very much for sharing your insight, Professor John, Professor VIRAY. It was very much insightful. And as a way of concluding this session, I'd like to highlight some of the important message from both of you. The first of all is the human centricity. The technology is always catching eyes, but it's working behind as an enabler. That's a very important message. And always the goal is the QOL, quality of life, happiness, well-being. So I heard many times words like culture, community, identity, relationship, all echoes with the sense of social cohesion and social capital. I think it's a very important message to share. And secondly, as an extension of the human centricity, both of you talked about the harmony with the nature. That's a very important message. The case of Sejong is an excellent case, placing it in the center of the country, surrounded by the environment, emphasizing the biodiversity. I think it's very, very much important message. And it's a kind of message telling us to say farewell to the civilization with the automobile, more focused on the personal mobilities, and the countries are now talking about the walkabilities. So, it's going back to where we started, actually. That is the second most important message. Thirdly, I would like to also mention, both of you talked about sharing the experiences with the other countries. The Professor John talked about cross-validation strategy, but in essence, it's a way of sharing insights from the both countries to other countries in Europe, in the United States, somewhere else. So it's turning around from zero-sum to plus-sum solution, which is a very good message. And lastly, I would like to mention that the COVID-19 triggered us to move forward. Actually, it's not the end of the game. We are now evolving from just a protection mode to evolution mode, using the architecture and computer simulations, AI, and so forth. and it's a sign of hope for us. That's about me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nagamo-san. It's very good to know that people are at the centre of cities still. I'm getting that same message from all three of you, and that's very good news for us. Thank you very much, Nagamo-san. And to our two speakers, Professor Jaeseung and Professor Erwin VIRAY, thank you very much for your insights. So fascinating, and sorry it couldn't be longer. I just want to mention the co-sponsors tonight. We've got Mitsubishi UFJ Research and Consulting, Asia Society Japan Centre, Shahani Associates, the Japan Foundation Asia Centre, MRA Foundation, Tanaka UK Japan Educational Foundation. Now, this is the last of the series. Please access the iHouse website to watch the recordings of previous sessions. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you.